There are at least two Iran wars taking place right now. There's the war being waged by the U.S. military and the Israelis. In this war, Iranian targets are being methodically destroyed according to carefully designed plans. The other war is playing out inside the brain of Donald Trump. We don't know the goals of this war, the metrics of success, or even whether Trump is assimilating information the way his military commanders are. Trump has been notably inconsistent in telling us what he believes the purpose and the goals of this war are. On any given day, he'll threaten to destroy all of Iran's energy infrastructure, and then the next day, he'll tell us that negotiations are taking place to bring about the war's quick end. He'll tell us that the goal is the overthrow of the Iranian regime, and then he'll say the goal is the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war. And then he'll let us know that opening the Strait of Hormuz doesn't actually matter. All wars are covered in a fog of misinterpretation and misinformation and uncertainty. This one, even more. I'm going to try to riddle all of this out with my guests tonight. Peter Baker, the chief White House correspondent at the New York Times. Susan Glasser is a staff writer at the New Yorker. David Ignatius is a foreign affairs columnist at the Washington Post. And Missy Ryan is a staff writer and Pentagon correspondent at The Atlantic. Thank you all for joining me this week's edition of What is Happening in the Middle East. Apparently that's the new theme of this show. David, is the U.S. winning the war? Donald Trump just said a little while ago today, he said it in the past tense. He said, we beat the hell out of Iran, as if he's moving on to Cuba.
When you asked the question, I could hear the quotation marks around the word winning.
Yes.
Because what does winning mean? Day by day, as you said in the introduction, the U.S. and Israel are destroying targets. They must be running out of some targets to hit. So in a tactical sense, there's no question that overwhelming military power is being brought to bear and Iran is being degraded. But today, we had a day when the U.S. financial markets, plunged dramatically. We had a day when 10 U.S. Service people were injured in Saudi Arabia as Iran struck back. So this war continues, and the more I watch this process of a weak enemy being pounded and pounded, I'm reminded of the Gaza war. Israel for 2 years hit Gaza. It invaded. It did what we haven't done in Iran. And yet today, with the war over, Hamas still controls most of the Palestinians in Gaza. Even with all that power, Israel wasn't able to win. And I think that's what we're all worrying about, as Donald Trump says, we won, it's over, it's over, it's over. We think about how far we are from a kind of decisive victory that would really end this in a way that everybody could be confident it's over.
Is the only decisive victory the overthrow of the regime by the people of Iran, most of whom hate the regime?
So the decisive change that I think many people want, certainly people in the region, is for Iran to be a different kind of country, to no longer threaten its neighbors, for the regime no longer to threaten its people, for Iran to be, as Henry Kissinger famously said, a nation, not a cause. And that will require a different regime. And I think, it's the hard part about this war. So many of us would like to see that change, but you can't do it through military power. That's what we're learning.
Right. Susan, what's your definition of winning?
Well, to the point of we've been told so many different things. I think it was the former Trump's first-term Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, who famously broke with him over Trump's treatment of American allies. He made the point this week, first of all, that the U.S. is unfortunately fighting without its allies for now and further alienating them. But I think most importantly, you can strike 10,000, 15,000 targets, but if you don't know towards what end, then you can't really define winning. It was the Pakistani foreign minister who was asked the same question the other day, and he said, right now, the only strategic goal I can identify for the conflict is reopening the Strait of Hormuz that was closed as a result of the war. And it's hard to imagine the U.S. leaving the war unfinished in that way. And I think that's where so many people, I've started to hear the Q word thrown around, and that's not a good word, Quagmire, when it comes to how is the U.S. going to even plausibly extricate. Trump may have moved on, but I don't see any realistic way where things stand as they do right now that it actually can be ended.
I thought the Q word was Quidditch, but that was just me. Peter, to be fair to the Trump administration, they have degraded Iran's ability to fire missiles at its neighbors. They're still firing missiles, but they destroyed some. So we'll talk to Missy, the Pentagon expert, about just how far they've gone down this road. They've degraded Iran's ability to be a threat across the region. That's more than just the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. No, look, the sum total of the last couple of years is that Iran is a far different country than it was before October 7th, 2023, right? Its ability to project force through proxies in the region has been degraded by the Israelis, particularly in Lebanon and Gaza.
Syria regime is gone,
right?
Iran regime.
The last war in June took out a lot of their air defenses, which is why we're having so much more success this time, because we don't feel the threat in going in to take out these nuclear sites and other things. So yes, it's not the same country it once was. It is absolutely, certainly degraded in that sense. The ballistic missile stockpile has been, if not wiped out, is certainly down significantly. But the question then becomes, if you don't have a new regime, if you don't have a change in the country, as Dave was talking about, does this mean then we have to do it again in 5 years or 10 years or 1 year? Who knows? Because they have made clear that they're not giving up. And they're not going to simply roll over and say, okay, Donald, you're right. We're going to be your vassal state now, and we're going to do everything you want us to do.
But if you're saying that to Marco Rubio, he might say in return, okay, so we'll do it in 5 years. But we have 5 years where Iran is not a threat.
And if you're living in the region and you've been threatened by Iran all this time, that might not feel like the worst bargain in the world, but it's not a permanent solution. Right. And I think one thing we've seen is that they continue to be a menace in the Strait of Hormuz to the world economy in a way they had not been prior to this war starting out, as Susan made the point. And in that sense, they have a vote on when this war ends, too. Right? Trump can say tomorrow, I'm done. I've gotten everything I wanted to do. But if the Strait of Hormuz is closed or still in their control in a long-term sense, then they've won something as well.
Right. Missy, from the Pentagon perspective, from the actual war that's going on, how far along the pathway laid out by Pentagon military planners is the U.S.?
So at the beginning of the conflict, we were told that they had about 3 or 4 weeks expected campaign in terms of the target set that they had developed with the Israeli military. We're now almost at 4 weeks. The combined U.S. and Israeli strikes have hit more than 15,000 targets. As Peter said, they've significantly degraded their ballistic missile, their defense industrial, and their naval capability. And now what is happening is the U.S. is getting in position the forces that it could require to try to clear the Strait of Hormuz militarily. That's, at this time, we know
and that's the insertion of Marines.
Marines, and they have, it's about 8,000 Marines and paratroopers. They've got two Marine expeditionary units heading to the Middle East.
Right.
You know, the most likely scenario is that they are holding those in reserve, potentially to clear the Strait of Hormuz, but they could be used in other ways as well. But the issue here is that there's an asymmetry. Even though Iran is weakened, its military capability has been degraded, there's an asymmetry in its ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, keep it closed with, you know, a small number of mines, a small number of missile strikes on commercial tankers. And there's also an asymmetry in its ability to threaten Gulf countries with the kind of drones that, even though, you know, the U.S. military has been hitting some of its manufacturing sites, it's easy for them to, you know, hide them in a garage, you know, put them in the back of a pickup truck and launch those and really continue to wreak havoc, the kind of havoc that's going to have an impact on oil markets, on financial markets here in the United States as well.
If one drone out of every 100, I mean, a drone packed with explosives gets through, that's a 1% victory.
I mean, exactly. And that, you know, I mean, I don't think we should underestimate Trump's ability to at least try to declare victory just out of the blue because he thinks that that suits his interests. But, you know, there really is the reality of continued strife that could, you know, bring down the kind of economic reality that I think is more resonant for him.